All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. I'm Rachel Searwooden. I'm the new Permanent Executive Officer to the Board and the Earthquake Early Warning Program Manager here at OES. So now I will go ahead and call roll. Do we have the Secretary of California Health and Human Services or a designee? Secretary of Transportation.
This is Darwin Musavi, Special Advisor to the Secretary here for Brian Ennis.
Thank you. Secretary of the Natural Resource Agency.
Jason Marshall of the Department of Conservation sitting in.
Thank you. Secretary of Business, Consumer Services, and Housing.
No.
A Governor appointee representing utilities.
Michael Lewis, Senior Vice President, PG&E.
Speaker of the Assembly appointee representing the interests of private businesses. Senate Committee on Rules appointee representing county governments.
Holly Porter, County of San Diego Office of Emergency Services.
Thank you. Chancellor of the California State University.
I think you guys got to push a little button when you, there you go.
Thomas Kennedy, Representative.
Thank you. President of the University of California.
Bob Charbonneau, representing the University of California.
Thank you. There's a copy of the draft meeting minutes from the last meeting in the packet in front of you. Could you please take a few moments to review those?
Madam Executive Officer, if I may, I'm advised that Brian Cash of the Resources Agency is on his way, and when he does get here, I'll give my seat to him.
Thank you. Okay, hopefully everybody's had an opportunity to look through those. Are there any proposed changes? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I motion that we approve the minutes.
And a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. If the director would like to make any opening remarks.
Thanks very much. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And again, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us today on the next meeting of the Earthquake Early Warning Advisory Board. So I'm very excited to say that, you know, there's been a continual progress with regards to the development and the proposed implementation of the Earthquake Early Warning System. I know that we're going to get a great briefing today on a number of things that are happening. Of course, since our last meeting, there's been obviously a transition in governors from one governor to the other. But I will tell you that, you know, as much as Governor Brown was focused on this topic, Governor Newsom is equally or actually more focused on this topic. And as such, you know, proposed in his budget for this year an additional $16 million to continue to complete the build out of the system and make sure that we are all on point to get the job done. So I know that since the last set of funding and some of the governance that had been done, we've made a lot of progress with building out the sensor array, and there's been some phenomenal technology improvements and capabilities that have been put in place and tested. And so I feel very comfortable, more comfortable, I would say, that we are on the pathway to get this system rolled out here in 2019 and be able to start getting the warnings out appropriately to the larger public. We still have some challenges that we need to work through with regards to moving the signal through the pathways in timely enough fashion, and making sure that our systems are resilient and redundant enough to get that out. But again, we'll probably hear today a number of different testings and research that had been done, and has been done, to try to address that particular challenge. I also want to, give a shout out to our partners in our federal agencies and Congress, and being able to continue to keep the focus on the program nationally. I was just in Washington, D.C. a week ago. We met with all the members of the California congressional delegations, both bipartisan meeting, and had a chance to continue to talk about earthquake early warning and their continued support and understanding that this is not only a priority for the governor and for the state of California, but certainly remains a priority for them as well. And that, of course, will be reflective in their continued support for funding to our partners in the USGS and others. I want to just thank you all for being here. I feel like, we're at that tipping point where this is going to start really coming together. And in the coming year, we need to really invest further on making sure that we're kind of operating on all 12 cylinders, that we get good investment and partnering with the users of the system, our private sector partners, so that we are utilizing, the various sectors are utilizing the system for their respective benefits. And there's a number of, obviously, we know benefits from this, depending on the sectors that can benefit from this. But I think there's a lot of people, as I know and many of you know, are waiting for us to officially get this thing rolled out. So look forward today to the brief outs and having a discussion with all of you. So again, thank you very much for your continued support, and look forward to this year kind of leaning on you guys a little bit more in your respective areas to ensure that we get things rolled out. So with that, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Director Ghilarducci. My name's Ryan Arba. I'm the branch chief for the Seismic Hazard Program here at Cal OES. I first, of course, want to welcome Rachel Sear-Wooden on board. She's appointed last month as the executive officer to this board, as well as the manager to the Earthquake Early Warning Program here at Cal OES. So welcome. So I want to touch upon, Mark had mentioned that we're at a tipping point, and I think that's a great way to describe the place that we're at with this system. There were several decades worth of research that got us up to a point where we had a proof of concept about the science and how it could work in a theoretical level. We then moved into different stages, such as having beta users and pilot users, et cetera. We've got some great use cases available. We're now at the stage where it's time to start scaling this to a statewide capability using all of the respective industries that are either under our purview in state government or through the industries that you touch through your representative industries. So it's that time, and hopefully today in the presentation I'll show you not only through our business plan overview, but also through the different functional areas, a path forward and how we can go about achieving that here in 2019. Okay, so again, I mentioned starting with the business plan. Last May, we brought everyone together. It's either April or May, and went over the original business plan we put out. And that business plan captured all of the technical costs for the system in order for us to complete the seismic instrumentation build-out, do the necessary work for the telemetry, education and outreach campaign, and other costs associated, not only the one-time costs, but also the ongoing costs. So in addition to putting out that business plan, our enabling legislation, Senate Bill 438, authored by Senator Hill, signed by Governor Brown in 2016, required an annual update to the legislature on 4 key components. Those components are the progress to the system, the funding acquired and expended, any contracts and RFPs, and then a summary of recommendations made by the board to Cal OES. In addition to that, we also want to use this business plan update as a way to signal what our path forward will be for those ongoing operations and help us better hone in on the way to make this program sustainable in the long run. So the original business plan talked about a rollout in this concept displayed here. Looked at 2018, starting a limited public rollout, and I'll be able to address that today. Moving with ongoing work in terms of installing instrumentation, doing the necessary telemetry upgrades, et cetera. Meanwhile, starting to educate the public, not only on what the system is and its capabilities and limitations, but also on what the best protective actions are for the public, depending on the situation you're in, so you can best protect yourself. And then starting to engage those the different industry representatives in order to get it so that this signal is integrated into their operations to best reduce their earthquake risk. The original business plan mapped a timeline all the way out to 2021, where, given the different rounds of funding that we've had, we feel that's a reasonable timeline, and we can move simultaneously not only on building out the technical part of the network, but also on rolling out this capability to the public where appropriate, while still ensuring that standards are being met. So in general, state funding has been received in 2 rounds, and again, as Director Ghilarducci had alluded, is also included in Governor Newsom's proposed budget this year. So $25 million in state general fund has been given to Cal OES, and we'll go over how those spending plans have been allocated in generalities. And then the final, in this year's proposed budget, Governor Newsom set aside $16.3 million to complete the remaining one-time costs that were identified in the business plan. So if you look at how these spending plans have built out, 2016, 17, if you've been to past meetings, we've identified this in various ways. But when we say system operations, most of the focus for system operations has been, up to this point, the seismic stations. So we've worked with University of California, Berkeley, U.S. Geological Survey, California Geological Survey, and Caltech, which is the California Institute for Technology, not the State Department, to contract the build-out of 183 stations. We're still working through those contracts right now. We also had $2.3 million for education and outreach. The majority, we worked with the California Broadcasters Association to run a statewide radio ad campaign. To date, we've aired 12,000 ads and are looking at continuing running those ads into the near future and through 2019. Research and development kind of came toward the end of as we were negotiating these different interagency agreements. $170,000 went toward the American public television stations to run what we're calling our data casting pilot, which is a way of using the excess signal in the television broadband in order to deliver these alerts. So instead of just relying on the internet to deliver the alerts, we have this other data casting capability. That equipment has been installed in those stations, and we're now working with them to identify the appropriate receivers in a way that those receivers could potentially scale. And then in addition, we use that research and development funding with our Public Safety Communications Division to run 2 what we're calling telemetry pilots. So the first one was taking the state microwave network, which is the same network we use for public safety officials to communicate via their radios. We used that telemetry backbone to connect data coming from the seismic instruments up through the state microwave network and then having a drop point into the seismic laboratories in Pasadena, as well as we've been working through a project to do the same for the Northern California Data Processing Center. So those, the work on those continues. And finally, we funded the business plan with the 16-17 money, and that's where you see the $250,000 in the finance column. We're working through the funding we've received for 2018-19. So we've brought more universities into the fold. We have, at the moment, participation from University of California, San Diego, as well as we brought another state agency, the Department of Water Resources, is also involved. They have a seismic network that's attached to the state water project. So trying to use and leverage as many of our state agencies as possible for that. That's in the 11.4 for system operations. We have $2.5 million set aside for telemetry, which will include not only, we looked at the existing network statewide and identified 25% of the stations as target stations that we could try to connect to the state microwave network, working through all the details on that. As you can imagine, we have to go site by site, do line of sight analyses, and it's been a lot of work. So our colleagues in our public safety communications division have been taking a good work toward that. We have also other projects that we've identified in some of the hard to, there are some stations that are so remote it's really hard to bring back data from them. So we've been looking at doing upgrades to radio repeater sites to enable us to bring seismic data back over the state microwave network. And the scoping for that continues. Finally, in the research and development column, this is a project that we're proposing to do with UC Berkeley on their MyShake cell phone application. We'll get into the cell phone applications a little bit later. Their cell phone application as developed has two advantages. The first one, it has the ability to distribute the public shake alerts when we decide that it's time for those to go. So people will be able to download that app and then receive the alerts on their phone. The second, it also uses the accelerometers that are in the phones in order to detect ground motion in the same way that our stations that we've paid for in this build-out do, but just the data is much different, as I've been told. So that component is a research project to see if we can use that capability to potentially shorten the time that it takes to detect an earthquake and to deliver a warning. Again, still in the research phase. We're excited about that and excited to see where that goes. And then finally, we can go through the $16.3 million, but as it was identified, it was for the remaining one-time costs. And as it's listed in the business plan, there are documented unmet needs for additional work on the telemetry side, $7 million for a statewide education and outreach campaign similar to Save Our Water or Slow for the Cones. We also looked at a hurricane hazard campaign in Florida and tried to come up with the best estimate of what it would take to be able to reach statewide. So we have some opportunities to leverage the work that we're doing now with the California Broadcasters Association and may choose to pursue other mediums as well, via online advertising and such. Okay. So then, of course, the ongoing part. This is one opportunity that we have in front of us. There's a lot of equipment that's been purchased, installed. We've done a lot of work on telemetry. However, all that equipment has to be maintained and operated over the long run to ensure that that earthquake early warning can carry in the decades to come. So through the business plan we published in May, we identified a little shy of $16.5 million for ongoing operations, which covered everything from the seismic instrumentation, maintenance, and repair over time, the cost to carry the data back to the seismological laboratories, education and outreach, and other components to that. One thing that has been a focus of Cal OES is making sure that those ongoing costs are in a sense, tagged to or found a nexus to those industries which can benefit from the capability that it's producing. The business plan outlines several different industries and ways that we could approach that. And the top three that come to focus is the use for utilities, and in particular, the investor-owned utilities, which cover a big portion of the users in the state. Transportation agencies, in particular rail, since Japan, the start, to my understanding, the start of their earthquake early warning in Japan was the high-speed rail industry. So working with those industries. And then finally, wireless telecommunications, and really that's a way of representing, since most people, when they think of alert and warning, they think of alerts coming to their phone. So it's a way of capturing the percentage of that cost to the public via the medium that they expect to be receiving the alerts from. So we're committed to work with all of the critical infrastructure partners that have been identified in this and pursue a portfolio that's reasonable and that we can maintain over the long run.
Let me just add a couple things to this. So this is the business plan, draft business plan right now is really talks about, what the long-term look at is. And, these three key sectors are really a start. We understand that there's municipal-owned utilities, and there's various kinds of utilities, that have a direct benefit from this system. Electrical, gas, water, wastewater, distribution. And so, the net would be cast broader as time goes on and we continue to evaluate methods of engagement with regards to these various sectors. And we're looking at, as innovative a way to engage the various sectors. $16.4 million spread across these various sectors is not a lot of money. If you think about the capability that it will provide and the sustainment of this system, $16 million across these various sectors is really literally pennies. And so as we broaden the number of sectors, it will even become less. Then what becomes a challenge, of course, is the state's ability to effectively collect all those little half cents, quarter cents, et cetera, to be able to invest into into the system. So, we'll work with the board and continue to refine this as time moves on. But this is really sort of the start of broadening this a little bit further. And transportation really is focusing on regional transportation networks initially. So systems like BART and MTA and other, regional high-use rail transportations that are board-controlled. The next level would be then to reach out to larger rail like, Caltrain and the Capital Corridor type of systems. And then, of course, when it gets built, high-speed rail in our state, going back and forth. And the high-speed's been a very close ally and collaborator with us through this process as they build out to ensure that earthquake early warning gets built into their to the high-speed rail system. So anyway, I just want to say that because this is a continuing to evolve. Ultimately, the idea, however, is to, look, we've invested now $41.3 million since 2000, and what was the date you had on there? 16. That's a pretty significant investment on a system that initially the community sort of thought it was going to be about a $23 million deal to buy out, to build out, and we're building out a system that is reliable, redundant, and effective, and that's been the commitment that I've had with this program to build that, and so that costs a little bit more. But to the credit of the governors and the legislature, to see the wisdom and the benefit of investing literally almost $42 million. At the point where we're going to go into the maintenance mode, then it's the users that are going to want to sustain that. And really, we've really thought through this to try to make it as minimal as an impact as possible as we work across the various sectors.
Hey, Ryan, one question.
Sure.
So this begins in 2021 or after phase 3, the funding requirements?
There's the ongoing funding need.
It's 2020.
2020, thank you.
Yeah,
Norm.
yeah, because it'll be the end of this, as we come to the end of the government-supported financial deal, we'll look to 2020 to begin the process of being able, because we're pretty good on funding at this point, but we've got a little time to work into it.
I have another question about the transportation partnerships. Are the transportation agencies themselves bringing forward any dollars, or how is that partnership working, or is it fully funded through the OES side?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so we've started those conversations. We've started the conversation with BART. Know we have another step to go to bring in the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, for example. We imagine that in Southern California, we'll have a similar task ahead of us on that. We've also had conversations with the California Transportation Commission to learn about how the different funding mechanisms work through them, and then also how all of these boards approach risk and approach the earthquake risk specifically. And I think once, as we continue to educate people about the system and the benefit that the system provides, they'll see that this is a very minor investment relative to the risk that they can reduce. Lupita, one more tap on the.
Sorry, I think I turned it off earlier. So when you talked about the initial 3 sectors, what are the other sectors that you're looking at as you look ahead?
Well, as we look ahead, we're looking at municipal-owned utilities. We're looking at broadening the transportation sector. We're looking at the health and medical sector. There's probably areas in our military sector. We're looking at all the critical infrastructure, chemical facilities. And when Ryan talks about sectors that have a direct benefit, an immediate benefit, those would be the areas that we would probably look to broaden on. But again, to reach the number. The goal of 16.4 million, when you're just spreading it across the state of California in the various sectors is working through that, it's not a lot. And to Brian's point, the benefit they receive for the investment that they're getting. Now, they have to, of course, understand that part, and part of our role is to continue to work with them to be able to do that. Let me also say that we've had a lot of disasters in California lately, big ones, catastrophic. The whole concept, the whole discussion and dialogue around alert and warning has become center stage. And the expectation that the legislature has already acted on alert and warning and driven us to enhance alert and warning, to build guidelines and standards throughout the state on trying to standardize the alert and warning system within California. Inherent in that is our update of the 911 system from the existing analog 911 system to the enhanced 911 system, right? And going to the enhanced 911, has a broad, it's very broad with regards to improvement in technology and improvements in capability, to be able to be more resilient and withstand the disasters that we're seeing. And as a part of that comes this whole issue of 911 being an integral component of alert and warning. And so as we build out the next gen 911, earthquake early warning, which is clearly a warning system, as well as some of the other warning systems that we're looking at, will be integrated into that overall piece. And then as you lay that over the top of that is, of course, the initiatives that we're doing with FirstNet and others to have the ability to move data, et cetera. Through that process is a very close working relationship with the private telecoms, right? As we in government become more dependent upon a system that we have no direct control over, yet we are dependent upon, there has to be a very close relationship between the telecoms and the public sector to be able to have the reliability and to meet the needs that we have in moving these alert and warning signals and other kinds of things in the time frame we have. And earthquake early warning is kind of pushing that to the edge because the speed at which we need to move the signal is, in my opinion, is still not, I mean, Ryan talked about a lot of, we're really working all over the place to try to find a way to get these signal moved in the time frame we're talking about. I'm not yet fully comfortable that we are exactly where we need to be. We are much better, and we're getting there, and technology is moving fast. But that's something that we need to continue to work with our telecom partners, and because we cannot be successful without that partnership with the telecom. So when it says wireless telecommunications, it's a number of things. It's government, public safety communications, where we're going with our strategies and investment in enhancing our statewide system and the backbone. Ryan mentioned using our microwave system, and we're really leveraging all of our existing state systems to support this, but also our partnership with our telecommunication, private telecommunication partners.
So the final part for our business plan update is the reported board actions. And we went through all the minutes, tried to track all the different discussions through, and we found these three key themes that came up. The first was individual interaction with warnings. So we've had several discussions regarding how individuals receive the warning and how to spur the best, them to take the most appropriate protective action, most commonly known as drop, cover, and hold on for our, in our earthquake preparedness messaging. But there are, other ways too, like such as when you're driving a car and et cetera, and we want to make sure those are all captured and those messages are received by folks. But we didn't take that lightly, so we funded 2 studies through this. The first was a research gap analysis, which we've used to further refine the questions to specifically hone in on how we can meet this objective, as well as a tone and iconography study. Both were conducted by Dr. Michelle Wood of CSU Fullerton. We can, bring her in at a later advisory board meeting to discuss some of her findings. But we have that information now, and we're working with our partners at the U.S. Geological Survey and others to come up with the best recommendations that we can make moving forward on how to present the alert and the different mechanisms that we have. Of course, if we'll go over wireless emergency alerts a little bit later today, that's one way of displaying an alert. These others with cell phones or how it's portrayed, say, in a building or an on-site facility, all have different considerations. But we're hoping that we can strike the balance between what we learn to be the best approach, as well as what's available today to ensure that people that the alert is getting as much reach as possible. Of course, with finance, had various discussions, and we touched upon those today. But just know that we made sure to capture all of those minutes, and as we were looking at the initial writing and the drafting of the business plan update, we made sure to incorporate those recommendations into what was going through for the next round. And then finally, increasing the end users through California. Again, Director Ghilarducci had mentioned we're at this tipping point where we have very good, solid use cases that we need to scale. So we're working, again, closely with our partners at the federal level and at the universities who are all involved in this project to make sure that we are being able to meet that need to rapidly scale this system throughout the next year and in the years to come. So that part wraps up the business plan update. As we mentioned, once the update is ready to go, we'll be sharing it with the advisory board members to seek your feedback. And we'll keep you posted on that as that goes. But we have an opportunity now for any other questions or comments that are. Okay.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate your detailed report and certainly good news on the governor's budget as well. So appreciate your report.
All right, thank you.
So seeing none, at this point, we can open up discussion for any public comment. All comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. If your comments go beyond 3 minutes, we just ask that you please submit them in writing. Is anyone interested in speaking? Okay. Seeing none, we will continue with Ryan, who will present on functional area updates.
I was hoping to have a break. Bummer. Okay, well, getting into the so again, as I mentioned earlier, we're on the path toward rolling this out in a way that is aggressive because we want to get these alerts out, but also thoughtful and making sure that the right standards are in place so that the alert can be effective. And what I've done is I've tried to overlap this presentation with our different functional areas to show how that progress we've been making in the functional areas aligns with our goals of rolling out the system. So, starting with some of our program objectives for this year. You know, whenever earthquake early warning or shake alert comes out in the media, often the question is, when am I going to get it to my phone? So that's certainly a highlight of what we're focusing on this year, and we're doing that in a few ways. The City of Los Angeles created a cell phone app contracted through AT&T. They released their app in January. We're studying that closely to see how we can best leverage that work into a statewide capability and option. And we'll go over all of those in more detail. We talked about scaling these demonstration pilots, and the one that I like to use is there is a fire station in LA County, which has integrated the shake alert signal into their operations in order to roll up the firehouse doors. The concept being that during an earthquake, the firehouse engine doors are so wide that the structure can be compromised depending on how the ground motion is at a location. If the door is open, then there's a higher likelihood that that fire engine would be able to deploy immediately following the earthquake to conduct their life safety response. So where we have, for example, one demonstration pilot locked in, we need to be working through our different advisory board members here to see how we can scale that. So in this case, Natural Resources Agency with CAL FIRE, we could start a dialogue with CAL FIRE about how we could use try to integrate it into their stations in the high seismic risk areas, as well as working through our county representatives to see how we can work with local governments to get this integrated and built out. So many opportunities to take these great demonstration pilots and scale statewide, and this advisory board is the perfect medium for us to be able to do that. And I'll get into detail later on how I see that coming to fruition. So again, I mentioned we want to move fast, but we don't want this to be the Wild West of alerting. We need to make sure that there are standards in place. So this board also has an opportunity to help us write those standards. And we can use that through our research and development function or some other function, engaging some of your staff members to help guide us on how to develop those standards to make sure that we're holding everybody who is helping us connect from the generation of the alert to the end user to a standard that is effective. We have to implement our ongoing financing structure, which we discussed in detail. And then, of course, we have to educate the public. And there are a few key things with that. I think the more that people understand what earthquake early warning is, the better they'll be able to understand where it can help them, as well as what the limitations of the system are. And of course, once they receive that alert, we don't want people thinking about what to do. We're hoping that we can educate the public to the point where they receive the alert and they immediately take the protective action, because these alerts are only coming in seconds. So we've got to get people moving really fast, and it'll be faster than today if they don't receive an alert.
So on that, let me just say, I still have, the vision is that through each of you, in your respective sectors, that we work with you to do this public education, right? there would be a way for, it's a way of contributing to this effort, working collaboratively with you through your normal ways that you communicate to the public and do public education to support issues associated with earthquake early warning. The more mediums we could get out to the public in the various ways to sort of reinforce the whole issue of earthquake early warning. So it's not just hey, the government is telling you that it's something you need to do, but they're hearing it from all of the partners that are engaged with earthquake early warning. So more on that, but I think that's something that we'll turn to you all as part of that. If you could imagine, the hub and spoke of getting out all of this kind of information would be really great.
Okay, so looking again at those public alert mechanisms, and I like to think of it in 3 layers, and this model also applies in our all-hazard alert and warning approach, where, there's not one silver bullet to reach an individual to make sure that they get the alert, but we have to be using every mechanism that we have possible at our disposal in order to make sure the alert gets out to help us reach as many people as possible. So the first is wireless emergency alerts, and most people are familiar with wireless emergency alerts because they've received an Amber Alert before. It comes on our phone. The National Presidential Test, alert test in, I think, October, was using wireless emergency alerts, and you may also get extreme weather notices. For example, I think a year or 2 ago, I got a tornado warning in Sacramento, so it does happen. But we're looking very strongly at how can we best leverage this, because it's an alert mechanism which already exists. However, it's to what we know today, it's not perfect. So we'll talk about a test that we have planned for the city of Oakland later this month in order to get some more granular data on exactly how effective that is as an alerting mechanism to help inform what our next step would be forward. The second is the cellular phone applications. We mentioned the city of LA's app that AT&T worked on as through a contract with the city of LA. Talked about this app that the state is currently negotiating with UC Berkeley, known as the MyShake app, which has the dual function. And there are other apps which either have been developed specifically for earthquake early warning or also may exist in terms of different counties in their regular alert and warning. If you wouldn't mind, Holly, I could maybe, yeah.
So I think it's a very good approach to pursue all of these at once. I know with, for example, near source tsunami, NOAA, National Headquarters, initiates a wireless emergency alert in local communities with protective action recommendations through WIA sort of automatically. So people are used to seeing alert and warnings generally from a local first responding agency, but that's a time when everybody's sort of determined, because of the timeliness needed with that alert and warning, they will initiate it, because there could be just minutes involved in getting that word out for people to get out of harm's way. And I see this kind of as the same. So I'll be very interested to see the comparison of, the timeliness of the alert, whether it comes from a mobile application or from the wireless emergency alert system. So from a local government perspective, we have an emergency app called SD Emergency, and we have over 500,000 lifetime downloads of that app. We have 3.3 million people in San Diego County, so it's a pretty significant number of people who use our app, and we send push notifications when there are fires or evacuations. They can find out where shelters are located. So I would think it would be a shame if we didn't have this sort of integrated with that app, which they have already downloaded and expect to get emergency notifications from. And I think Director Ghilarducci has said in the past, at least from reading the minutes in past meetings, that we know that opt-in systems, receive far less success rates than opt-out systems. So I'm glad to see that all of them are on here, that it's a menu and we're pursuing all of them. Ultimately, it seems like an automated system, if it's timely through WIA, is going to reach the most people But I'd also like to have it as a feature of the app we've already developed through AT&T, as an added alert that we send out through that app as well.
So it's a really important point. Look, as far as I'm concerned, if we could get the signal out fast enough by a plane pulling a banner across the state, I'd do it. I mean, I think we need to look at all the modalities and build on what exactly is existing. It's all about the time frame, though. You know, even the WIA has a series of time frames that are built into it before the message can get out. And when we're talking about trying to push a P-wave signal out, you know, any second you lose in doing that is a second less you're going to be able to get out to the public. And so, you know, as technology improves and as we can, you know, build faster pathways, then, you know, we'll get there. But it's one of those things where, perfect gets in the way of good enough. Maybe at some point, we need to be able to move forward with this. And I think we're at a point now where a signal out, even if it's not, you know, as perfect, is better than no signal at all. And so, you know, and then how we tie in Holly to all the different systems is going to be important, because the work that has been done through the legislative action and work we've been doing with the legislature to move everybody to an opt-out program. In other words, for those who don't get that, is that people will have to now physically opt out versus used to be that people would physically opt in to an alert and warning program. But now they'd have to actually call and say, take me out, right? So if they want to do that action to take out, then, you know, they don't want to get any alert warnings. That's their prerogative. But for the general masses, you know, we're going to get them opted in. And that's going to be helpful to Holly's point about all the people that are already engaged in the program. And there are many counties that have this already in place. So we want to capitalize on all of those things and be able to get the signal out. But, we can get into the granular details, but the issue of getting that signal from the time that the sensors pick it up to the time we get it broadcast is still going to be one of the big challenges we face.
One other question, Ryan. So I notice you have the test scheduled for Oakland, which I'm skipping ahead to your next slide.
That's okay.
But I wondered if it might be useful to have more than one test with different topography. Just with the WIA system, sometimes that can, I think, make a difference.
Yeah, and in fact, I'd say we're certainly open to that, and even, in other all-hazard alerting mechanisms, you can, for example, with my tsunami program that I oversee for the past decade, maybe we've missed a year or two, but we've had annual tests called a life code test in the North Coast and run those on an annual basis. It worked out that Oakland was a good fit for the timing, and we were able to get a waiver through with the FCC in order to do that. I certainly think it'd be a great idea to be able to take that test to other locations, and I think it's going to be easier in a month. We were maybe 2 months. In May, we were told we won't have to go through the full waiver program, so we'd be able to just work directly with a local official like yourself or others in the state in order to do a targeted test. Another big benefit to doing the WIA test today as compared to doing an emergency alert test, which would be broadcast over the airwaves, is we can target it to small communities if that's the choice. So this one in Oakland, we've picked an area of downtown Oakland where there are businesses that either government agencies or businesses that are engaged in emergency management who have agreed to pass a survey along to their employees so they can report to us when they receive the alert, so we could have that data. So we can also take that approach and do a much more targeted alert instead of having to do it to the entire county or to an entire region, for that matter.
Ryan, I have one. As I look at the diagram, is that the alert that Oakland residents will get?
Yes,
on the test?
and so if you can kind of see that on that, we've been trying to refine that map to make it as useful as possible. But yes, it's a very It's a relatively small area. Off the top of my head, I don't have the exact size, but this is, if you're familiar with Oakland, this is where FEMA's Region 9 office is. There's a Caltrans District 4 building there. I think Kaiser has a corporate office there. But what it is.
It's Bob Charbonneau's office is right there, too.
Hey, there you
So
go. All
we-
right.
we need to
have high
sign 'em up
expectations for
right
you,
there.
yes.
Thanks, Bob.
So yeah, and what the map is the polygon is designed to capture the towers. So it's not going to be a perfect map. It'll be if your phone is hitting a particular tower that's in the map area. So we're expecting some level of bleed over, which hopefully will be, reasonably contained.
And how many will get the warning alert?
So in our estimate that the target area has a 40,000 person daytime population. Very much more higher on businesses, because again, our goal is to get employees to fill out a survey instead of residents. And we worked with that through the city of Oakland too. We thought it would be easier to do the outreach to businesses and stakeholders already engaged with emergency management than trying to go for the public. But, for a future test, we could take a different route.
Thank you.
Sure. Just want to go back once.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you need other folks to participate to do the survey? We have some state agencies that are there in the Oakland area.
Absolutely, and in fact, we were just finalizing the details today with the city of Oakland. We're planning on having a stakeholder call on is it the 12th or the 19th?
On the 19th.
On the 19th, so we'll have a stakeholder call. We'll make sure all advisory board members get that within the next day or two, so you can send out, and that call will be for anyone who's in those areas, or in the alert area, so we can educate them on the purpose of the test, as well as try to get their buy-in on passing out the survey.
Great,
So,
thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. So just to hit on the key details, and then I'll go back to the previous slide, which talks about our statewide public rollout proposal. But it's going to be March 27th, 11 a.m. It's in partnership with USGS. They will be sending an alert from the test server, I believe, a shake alert, which will go through to alert that polygon, and then we'll be able to have, again, employees in that area taking the survey and reporting back to us if they received the alert, as well as at what time exactly they received the alert.
Ryan, are you able to add any other folks outside of those 40,000 targeted to receive this alert? Like, for example, if you wanted to add this board so that we see what residents in that targeted area get?
My understanding is no, because it's all about
SMGO.
where your phone is hitting a tower. So you have to be in that targeted area. However, as we start moving into the different cell phone applications, we could design tests, potentially, I'll say in theory at least, where we can have some target folks in order to get a broader representation of how long the alert takes. And in fact, one key thing that we really like about the MyShake cell phone app is there's an ability to do tests, end-to-end tests of how long it takes to deliver the alerts and for a phone to receive it without the user noticing. And I'm going to look to Jen here, on just the Android version, maybe not the Apple, or we're still exploring ways to do that with the Apple phones. So we have some different ways that we're looking to get as much data as possible, and with the goal that if the data isn't the way we like it, we'll then be able to use that to work with industry to make it better.
Ryan, quick question. Is it correct to say that you're looking now at use of the wireless emergency alert system, irrespective or not yet considering who might be the initiator, if it's found that WIA is a good solution for delivering the alert and warning to the public, it's not yet decided who would be the initiator?
Yeah, so we
entity
know
or
it's
agency?
the USGS at this point, and there's
Okay.
and we've got our partners here who have that. It would be generated from their Shake Alert server, and it would be automated, so there would be no human having to touch it because it's got to happen lightning fast. There will be an output from that which will be in the right format so that FEMA can process it and then send it on.
Okay, thanks.
Did I get that right, Doug? Okay. Okay. Any other questions or clarifications on the WIA test? So just going back to this, the rollout is something that, again, has been very of high interest, not only to this advisory board, but to also all the stakeholders that we deal with. We've had these big rounds of state general fund investment. We're installing the instruments in the ground. When are we going to get the alert? So based on this, looking from a public alerting perspective, our goal is to start sending alerts in the areas that are the most seismically built out based on the station density this summer. Now, there's some testing that we've committed to. We want to make sure that we're doing this in a way that if the testing area, so if we had to send an alert to tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of folks, if that's going to compromise how fast the alert would take, we want to make sure we're taking that into consideration. But our goal is to be able to alert to the San Francisco Bay Area as well as the greater Southern California area, Ventura all the way down to San Diego County now, and then east to the populated cities, and then the full San Francisco Bay Area by this summer. We're going to continue working toward that goal, but we need your help. So, okay. So when it comes to system operations, and this is the area where we focus on the technical side. So this is the seismic instrumentation as well as the telemetry component, and then I'm going to add a part at the end. But I got into this a lot earlier, but just know that we're working with several state and federal partners in order to complete the build-out. The next round of funding, we're in the final stages of negotiating interagency agreements. I mentioned before we expanded the group to include UC San Diego as well as Department of Water Resources. CGS is also taking a big portion, UC Berkeley, and as well as our Public Safety Communications Division is also had been very engaged in the sense that where we have I've heard it captured as a point of presence model. So if there is as a tower where there's already existing communications that can back all the data back to the network, we're going to leverage our Public Safety Communications Division in order to, with help from the scientific agencies, to install the seismic instrumentation at those sites to not only reduce costs, but also to increase our footprint. So the goal, as was identified in our original implementation framework, which we published in 2016, was 1,115 stations. And at this point, with a mix of state general fund as well as federal funding, we believe we will be able to purchase or through contracting, get to that 1,115 stations by the end of 2021.
Let me say that on this effort has been really a collaborative effort, California Geologic Survey and our CISN partners and our ability to rapidly streamline CEQA to be able to get these things in the ground, and support from the state agencies and some local governments, and to be able to utilize their properties to be able to put these sensors in the ground. So it's a greater effort. I think one of the areas we want to, and maybe we've already accomplished, I don't know, but expand into the CSU, UC system, see if, in some of the properties and be able to leverage those properties as well. So it's something that we can talk with our universities about. Would be
Yeah,
really
absolutely. And I think we've definitely worked with you guys to hit a few of the high target ones. I got a Peggy from UC Berkeley in the back's giving me a thumbs up. So we've definitely worked through the UCs. Had a good breakthrough recently with all the efforts with state parks. They're a big landowner in the state, had to work through some of the paperwork on the side, but we were able to get it where I think there will be a few dozen sites on state parks over the next few years, some that we're working on immediately, and they're in critical areas that have been hard to find locations on. And then I think even as the network was built out before the transition started from California Integrated Seismic Network, well, it still is that, but also including the earthquake early warning, there have been several local government partners from, fire stations and building owners that have hosted instruments. So it's a big portfolio of landowners that are helping, and we're grateful for all the different agencies represented on this board that have been able to help. So one thing I want to add to, or at least propose adding to system operations, is this final component. I'm calling it last mile applications. So we've always thought of system operations as the seismic instruments as well as the telemetry, really the point to where we generate the alert. And we've had pilots for the ways to connect that alert to end users. Mentioned the fire stations, cell phone apps, et cetera. Some of these last miles are more complicated than others. But in the sense that this advisory board has a wide range of direct authority over different state agencies and operations, as well as influence through the different industries. I'm hoping that in the coming months we can start looking at the last mile connections for these industries in the same way that we approach the system operations in terms of a statewide build out. So picking those critical areas as target areas, documenting that. We have a project going through UC Berkeley right now, or in partnership with UC Berkeley, we're calling it a compendium best practice project. So we're taking the lessons that we've learned from all the different pilot applications, capturing that and looking at a way to scale this rapidly. So I don't know exactly where this last mile build out will fit in the advisory board structure, but it's something that I think if we can take a systematic and planned approach to, we might see more success over the time. So this is just, you've seen this chart in one way or another over the time. It's basically meant to show that by the time the state funding came in, we were about halfway built out with the network. We had the first round of funding in 2010, which got us 183 additional stations, which were installed all over, though more likely than not to be installed north of Bakersfield because there was more need in the northern part of the state. And then finally, with the last round of state funding as well as ongoing federal funding that has come in 2 different rounds, we'll get to that statewide build-out capability. So R&D. And again, I mentioned this, several dozen pilots, not only in California, but also some pilots that USGS, the University of Washington, and University of Oregon have arranged in Oregon and Washington. Our goal is to really hone in on the research and development function that this advisory board has to get us pushing those pilots to statewide implementation. We also mentioned the need for standards for end user applications, and it's something I see also this research and development work group could tackle. And it could be, well, we'll get into how this will work in the end, but some of the different objectives going forward. Looking at reducing the latency for what's known as the known warning zones, so trying to expedite the generation of the alert in a way that's thoughtful, but again, with the end goal of getting this alert out as fast as possible. Mentioned the compendium project where we'll be documenting best practices for interacting with the system. And then finally, providing guidance to these different industries to scale up and streamline any processes that are necessary in order to get us toward that goal. So with finance and investment, I've already talked about the State General Fund as also identified in our business plan published last May. At the time, the USGS had received $10 million in one-time funds for 3 states. It was estimated that $5.5 million of that has come into different parts of the network operation in California. And then finally, we just secured a contractor to do a benefit cost analysis. So this was something that came up during the advisory board discussions over the past time, that we needed to do a very thoughtful analysis, not just identifying the sectors, which we had done in our benefit study, which was 2 years ago now, but looking specifically at those sectors and actually saying, okay, here's how much it costs to integrate this into your operations, and here's the benefit that you can receive as a result of your risk reduction. Fortunately for FEMA's hazard mitigation program, there's already a lot of models related to seismic risk, mostly with structural and non-structural retrofits. So we think we can use a lot of that knowledge, down to the point of how many in a school, if an earthquake hits during the time, based on the full range of potential earthquakes over a 30-year period, how many injuries could be avoided. And then we can look at how the earthquake early warning capability can help increase that, the injury avoidance, not the injuries. But we've had Some good timing as well. The Federal Disaster Recovery and Reform Act of 2018 added earthquake early warning as eligible activities. So still waiting for guidance to come out on that. But over time, we should be able to see more and more of these projects qualify for our hazard mitigation grant program, which is usually, there's an annual component to that as well as a component that's attached when we have these larger scale disasters where communities can take advantage of that. So we're excited. A lot of good things going on in the finance and investment, in addition to, of course, our business plan update. So the education and training, I mentioned the work we're doing with the California Broadcasters Association. We've aired 12,000 radio ads to date, and still have time to, we'll continue going down that path through the end of 2019. Be looking at, with assuming the next round of funding comes through in the governor's budget, should have $7 million, which we can target toward a statewide education and outreach campaign. But in addition, there's been a lot of work, a lot of these often led by USGS as well as Berkeley and Caltech, having sector-specific symposiums where the industries that are either already engaged in pilot projects or interested in pilot projects can come together to discuss their best practices, and it's given us some really good feedback as we're looking to do this rapid statewide build-out for these different uses. And then finally, we've targeted, where possible, attending specific industry-specific meetings to educate the public or to educate these sectors on earthquake early warning and hope to engage them into the next steps to rolling out. So again, in the future,
Ryan, quick question.
Yeah.
The radio ads that have run, what areas? Whole state or what
statewide,
markets?
I know the ones that I've heard from people in Southern California.
Okay.
Have heard them, but yes.
I haven't heard them, so I was just
Statewide, and
curious.
in fact, maybe toward the end, we can get you an update if you're interested in specifically which stations they've been running.
You know, Brian, I think it'd be great if you could send the link of the radio ad to all the board members.
Okay.
Because there's, and then you guys can maybe push that. But I think I want to follow up with phase 2, where maybe we reach out and take that same information and share it with you, and then maybe you guys in the various sectors can use it and build it into some of your public affairs, stuff. So that's, since that's already all camera ready and it's being utilized, it may be easy for you to incorporate into your capability. Because there's going to be messaging and others, and I think it's long-term education, right? So this is the initial, hey, earthquake early warning is coming, then it's going to have to be a little bit more, okay, it's ready to go, this is what you do when you get it, and then, ongoing after that. So the education is going to be a long-term sort of nonstop. And I kind of look, we, in our Homeland Security role, we have something called, See Something, Say Something campaign. We work with the federal government. You may notice when you go through a lot of the airports, we have co-branded statements that are up on the wall in the airports about this. We will do something like that with you all to be able to get that messaging out.
Thank you. And one more question. How many languages are the ads running in?
English and Spanish.
Which is probably something we need to, again, continue to revisit and expand. Los Angeles basin alone, there's many, many languages that we need to be able to get this out into. So we need to do a little more work in that area.
Sure. Okay. So again, looking forward to the next round, assuming the governor's proposed budget is passed, we'll have an opportunity to really expand this one-time education and outreach campaign, and using various different mediums all the way down to the printed educational materials that we can distribute at county fairs, to using the more broadcast methods and trying to hit people in all areas where they're ready to receive the information so we can get the intended consequence that we're hoping from the system. Okay, so back when Senate Bill 438 was being formalized, the concept of the advisory board is depicted as you can see here. And we've always tried to incorporate in these meetings the 4 functional areas: system operations, research and development, finance and investment, and education and training. And we're at that point now where we feel that we're not only ready, but we have an urgent need to leverage these working groups through you as advisory board members to get us to this next stage. As you can see also on the slide, there's a lot of different activities under these groups. So we're going to, I'm proposing a path forward where we can look through what the most urgent priorities are coming from ours, what you see as the most urgent priorities, and pick a few to focus on this year. So for the work group organization, I'm going to ask that each of you as advisory board members designate leads for each working group, and that could be for our state agency partners, that could be a specific department as appropriate, it could be someone from the agency level to help for the, for our other representatives in utilities, local government and business, and the UCs, it could be someone from your staff, or it could be someone else that's a partner within your industry that you think might be good. But we'll, so yes, so we're going to work with you to designate those leads for the working groups. Then I'm also asking for the advisory board members to designate staff to work on day-to-day issues. We've seen this model in other state agencies, state boards in California government. It's been referred to as a key staff model, but it helps us at OES work through all of our representatives on the board to get our day-to-day objectives met. So, these work groups and the leads will have an opportunity to establish objectives, timelines, and measurement. And then eventually, I won't have to be up here because you guys will be reporting out, which is probably mutually beneficial. So that's really what I leave the group with today, and would welcome your thoughts on how to move forward so we can best take advantage of you guys.
So let me just, I want to refine a little bit, because the last little comments that Ryan made are important. Idea on, when you look at the organizational structure as envisioned by the legislation, this is now we're at a phase where we're building the capacity in the system, right? And since, all of us have a stake in this, it's important that all of us incorporate and weigh in. And we understand that, when he says you're going to commit staff and all, we really were looking for having individuals that, your organization could identify to contribute in on these working groups and help to provide technical engagement and advice. We're working with all of you individually through the program. But as this gets into something that is now built in a foundation and has got sustainability, and we get into a program that is there in the governance of this program, the vision is this would be a long-term collaborative effort. And, each board meeting, instead of listening just to Ryan, which we love to listen to Ryan, the various sections, whether it's ops or research or whatever, can come up and make presentations. And this is just more to quantify where we're at. Then we can start to funnel funding or appropriately place funding or legislative support or policy decisions based around the work of the various working groups. This is the list of the items that are listed under each of those are a series of items. When we originally put the legislation together, can be refined and changed a little bit, but the existing structure is outlined in the legislation is important that we move forward with. So that's kind of the idea behind that. And because I think when we say we want people to commit, people get a little nervous. It's really, we'll work with you to be able to do that and see what we can get contributed to the system. So.
That concludes my presentation.
Well, I just want to open up and ask the board if anybody has any thoughts or comments about what maybe they're doing in their respective area, or if there's any advice or anything that because we ended the formal presentation to see if there's anything more on the part of the board members.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to kind of report our progress working with the Berkeley Lab on the sensor installation. And indeed, we've been able to leverage our statewide land assets already. We have a statewide natural reserve system. We have a statewide agricultural and natural resources system, as well as remote fuel stations. And we've been able to hook Peggy up with all of those folks. And so that's been great. So we've been able to do that for them. And our next move is to do interagency agreements with other state agencies to start leveraging state parks, CAL FIRE, and other facilities. And we might need a little help with that. So far, so good, right, Peggy, I think? Yes. Very good, yeah. So we're moving forward with that, and that's been working pretty well. So, and we'd love to participate in that Oakland WEA test. So we have 1,500 people.
That'll hit our, if you make every single one of them, I think we'll then have a statistically valid sample. So we'll just count on you then, yeah.
Brian, I don't know if that was a call for volunteers at the end. It's my first meeting, but I will, I'd like to be involved in the systems operations work group.
Okay.
And I can commit staff to the education and training work group as well. Okay. And I'd be happy to help facilitate expansion of any pilots that you have in the various sectors that you noted, whether it's healthcare or fire stations. Anywhere that you'd like to, in San Diego, install additional sensors I'd be willing to help out with that.
Okay.
I also wanted to know if there was any sort of integration of access and functional needs considerations into the development of the system itself. I know for us, a lot of what we're asked related to alert and warning is, sort of what we're doing to reach people who may not receive messaging through the traditional means or have an access or functional need that may impede their ability to receive alert and warning messages. So it might be somebody to include on one of the development work groups as well.
Absolutely, and I know, if we'd like more details now, I can ask someone in the audience to speak to it. I would say yes, they've definitely been included in many of the different discussions, especially the research that we had funded. We asked them to make the researcher to make some considerations for AFN, and certainly keeping that in mind. So if we want to get into the details, I can poll the audience, or we can wait and have a follow-up conversation, whichever's appropriate.
Well, I think maybe it'd be beneficial to give
Yep, all right, so
Good brief.
I'll tag either Bob, Jen, Cindy, someone, whoever'd like to.
So on behalf of the California State University, under the research and development, it talks about independent peer review and analysis. The CSU maintains a standing independent board, our seismic peer review board.
Oh, okay.
And it's standing for there. We have agreements in place, and this would be right up this board's area of interest, and would work, I think, for the university and for the whole group. So certainly.
Okay, outstanding, thank you.
Hey, Ryan, early thoughts, we have a liaison that we're pursuing to work with Cal OES, and I would think it'd be, logical to have that liaison move into this area as well to support this effort, as well as other efforts underway in a partnership and working with the other utility as well within the state of California. Yeah, so I can make that work. And I would ask that you, give me advice on where we can add the greatest value.
Okay, great.
To support this effort.
Perfect, thank you. Let me follow up with Holly's request. Who would like to, do we pass that back? Or?
Sure. So I'm Bob DeGroot from the U.S. Geological Survey, and I manage the Communication Education Outreach enterprise for Shake Alert. And so with regard to the question about adaptations for AFN, we're actually drawing on a lot of what's already been developed. So the Earthquake Country Alliance, which is actually is managed out of the University of Southern California, SCAC, essentially, have developed a number of resources to address special needs for folks. So we are actually using materials that have already been developed in that regard. So that's one piece. Another piece that we can add to this as well is that Ryan referred to the study that was done by Dr. Michelle Wood from Cal State Fullerton. There was actually a study done prior to that which actually looked at a lot of these issues as well, related to what people can hear, different frequencies, that kind of thing. So that piece is also being addressed. But we're also, within Shake Alert, we have a very active social science research enterprise that actually are addressing a lot of these questions that are coming up, but also working with practitioners who do this sort of work as a routine, as part of their job. Now, with regard to working with specific pilots, specific environments, and specific sectors, there we would work with individuals in those environments. So our goal is not to necessarily redo someone's standard operating procedure, but rather what we would try to do is integrate Shake Alert related processes, procedures into their existing standard operating procedures. So if they have something that have adaptations for people with special needs, we would attempt to build those in rather than trying to redo them completely. So the basic answer to the question is yes, we have really comprehensively realized that this is something that we want to address, and also we've addressed it right from the beginning. So hope that gets at the question.
Thanks. And any follow-up? Oh, okay. All right, so I've got half the board signed up for something. We'll pull you after if you haven't volunteered yet. But yeah. Okay. Great.
Before we do any more signups over here, I had a question in regards to the last mile applications that you mentioned. Is that something that would be explored at this point as part of research and development, or is that not really on the table yet? Because I do see a lot of synergies with the transportation sector, both applications that I could potentially think of with CHP and Caltrans in terms of our infrastructure, that there would be some great applications there that we could be involved in.
Yeah, so how I see this playing out is if there is a defined use case that we know works, we need to get that scaled. Mm-hmm. If there are still some concepts or ideas that we want to vet, then that would be more in the R&D bucket, and we can work work with your agencies and industry in order to get it tested, and then eventually we'll find something that works and push it into the scale category.
But the point is that we definitely want to have engagement from those agencies and departments that can bring. We know that Caltrans, for example, has capabilities out there that can be very beneficial to this program, and conversely, get a direct benefit from that. And I got a noodle on how, CHP obviously as well from the transportation movement, but look, we want all the different agencies, and that, clearly from the governor on down has been, getting all the different agencies stepping up on this thing with regards to making sure that it's implemented.
Which takes me to my second point of happy to help identify folks both for system operations and research and development, where I think the transportation agency could fit best.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to say to Bob, whenever you're working, you're going to reach out and work with CAL FIRE and Fish and Wildlife and our other agencies, just let me know and I'll help facilitate that.
Thank you.
And by the way, as we mentioned, the resources agencies and departments have been really great on this process. So we're very appreciative of that. And parks have been just phenomenal. So Director Magnet has been great on this project.
Okay, with that said, do any other members of the board have any additional comments or remarks? Seeing none, we can open it up for discussion for public comment. So again, all comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. If you go over those 3 minutes, we would ask that you just please submit those comments in writing to us. And with that said, is there anyone who would like to make public comment? Okay. Seeing none, we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Excellent. All those in favor? Motion passes. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, everybody.